Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the long-awaited completion of the Herbert Blomstedt Brahms Symphony Cycle, numbers 3 and 4, with the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra on PentaTone. Now, the first, as I already discussed, was a snoozeroo, plain and simple. The second got better as it went. It had 3 splendid movements and a rather droopy first movement. This, well, I did a video, in my talk on Blomstedt's 10 best recordings. I did a preview video where I talked about the dangerous line between sincerity and blandness. There's no question about Blomstedt's sincerity. He's a wonderfully serious, sensitive musician, but he's often bland. He tries to let the music speak for itself, to disappear, into the music as though nobody is guiding it at all. It's simply evolving in front of your eyes. And when that works, it has a fabulous sense of organic inevitability, and it's just brilliant. Doesn't work here. Sorry, folks, it just doesn't. This is on the bland side. And it's a shame because the playing is gorgeous, and the recording, at least in the third, is better than the fourth, but it's very beautiful. It's just dull. And I hate to say it, but there you go. We know that he's like 95 and he's still conducting, and I don't want to say that, it sounds like the work of an old man, because the tempi are generally, he doesn't sound like he's, at death's door. Let's put it that way. It's not boring that way. It's boring in the sense that there is so much more you could do with the music than he does. Let's talk about each symphony in turn, and you'll know what I mean. So we'll start with the third. The opening movement of the third symphony is Allegro con brio. There is no brio here. It begins very promisingly. He makes a big crescendo on those initial chords, which Brahms doesn't mark, by the way. You really should wait to do the crescendo before the coda. That's the one place where Brahms marks the crescendo on those chords, because he wants them to be most exciting there, and you're supposed to have something in reserve. Well, this shows the wisdom of Brahms' ideas, and also the fact that Blomstedt is not I have no ideas, I don't ever do anything. It's not true at all. He does have ideas, and he does do things. He does countless things, sensitively as often as not. But once you make that huge crescendo and you launch the symphony at a non-con brio tempo, it's just too slow, but it's big and it's bold, and you're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, except that as soon as, the main theme ends and it starts going, it just, and it's not a question of just a question of speed. It's a question of accent and rhythm, and it's just too slack. It really is. Now the inner movements are gorgeous, as was also the case in the first symphony and the second symphony. They're lyrical and sensitive, and you don't have to do anything dramatic. That's the thing. There's no drama in those movements. They're just poetic miniatures, basically, and he plays them beautifully, exquisitely even. But then comes the finale, which is usually the sticking point in most performances of the third. And here, it does something that happens really quite frequently. It begins it's very promisingly. It's moving. And you feel the latent power and energy. But once it cuts loose, it just gets heavier and heavier and slower and duller. And that big central climax has no tension whatsoever. This is one of those cases where clarity is the enemy. Because the brass are like, blah, blah, da, 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 and the strings are doing these whirling triplet things, like that, right? And you don't want to hear what the strings are doing. You just don't. You want to be conscious of what the strings are doing, but you don't have to hear them as completely co-equal to the climax in the brass. That's bad. That's very, very bad. And that's exactly what happens here. It's just a total letdown. So, sorry, Not because there's anything terribly wrong, just because it's dull, bland, characterless. Now the fourth is a whole nother kettle of beans. It suffers from some of the same issues. The opening, the first movement, is so gentle. It has this sort of, it sort of materializes out of nothingness. And it's very beautiful, except that it doesn't materialize soon enough. And you want to like get that firmness of articulation in there at some point, and it's very gentle. It's very gentle and ultimately rather uninteresting. I mean, it builds up to a nice climax at the end. I mean, he does what the music says you're supposed to do, but we don't get terribly involved. The second movement also, curiously, nice tempo, a little bit less than 12 minutes. It's just perfectly paced and very, very beautiful. But boy, it's so matter of fact. It just doesn't have that bardic quality to it. It should really sound like, some sort of ancient legend being told, and there should be some atmosphere and poetry in it. And this is just straight ahead. And the third movement, it's the same stuff that happens with the finale, actually, in the third symphony. That is, it just doesn't have enough punch. It's a function not of tempo. The tempo is perfect. It's a question of accent and rhythm. And they don't play hard enough. And and this is undoubtedly Blomstedt's intention. I mean, that's what he wanted, and they give him what he wants. But what he wants is so antithetical, I think, in this case, to what Brahms is trying to do. I mean, that third movement is really a little volcano there. And, you don't have to be vulgar about it, but my goodness, you could pack such a wallop into it. And it's all the more important that you do it because what's coming next is the Passacaglia, where you really, really want to create the most effective possible contrast between the two movements. And this Passacaglia is rigid. It is rigid and you want it to sound like the implacability of fate and all that stuff, but here it's just the monotony of fate is what it is. Yeah, it's inevitable, and it's inevitable. And the inevitability is what's going to put you to sleep, because it's inevitable, but it's not interestingly inevitable. So, I don't know what to tell you. This is just it's a disappointment to me. And PentaTone, by the way, has a superb Brahms cycle with Marek Janowski and the Pittsburgh Symphony, of which numbers 2 and 3 are not available, while numbers 1 and 4 are, which makes no sense to me at all. At least not available as physical product. Fortunately, I got them when they came out. Now, that's a glorious Brahms cycle, and it's very interesting because he's a conductor who's quite similar to Blomstedt in his approach, but everywhere in those performances, there is more conviction, more weight, more power, more strength, more energy, more rhythmic snap. I'm sorry, Maestro Blomstedt, this is not your best work. Plain and simple. So keep on listening, friends, to other Brahms cycles. Take care.